Alright. What the heck's going on, everybody? It's a sad day for Starcraft esports, and I'd say real-time strategy esports in general. I've logged in this morning. Looks like no SC2 for EWC 2026 here, posted on the Starcraft Reddit, and of course, it's a screenshot of the official webpage where you can see the final game, Trackmania for the Esports World Cup, has been announced. This is pretty tragic. You can see a lot of people lamenting it in the community, kind of going, come on, Blizzard, step up and actually do something. But of course, mostly just kind of going, end of an era. This is really sad, as this was the last big, huge tournament that was propping up kind of the massive live LAN events, huge stage, professional broadcasting, and massive prize pools that we've come to know and love in StarCraft 2 that's motivated the top players for the last 15 years. Honestly, this kind of gutted me, and I wasn't really sure exactly how to respond. I went live and decided to just process this on stream, and a lot of it was just reacting to things, reading everyone's takes, sharing a lot of sadness, a lot of stories with the Twitch chat. And I think one of the posts that really resonated with me here was a tweet from Kalaris, and he said, look, I was already having a rough day, but no StarCraft at EWC hurts. I suspect that also means I won't be doing any SC2 in 2026, since that was the only place nowadays that fancies taking a desk host for the game. I feel like over the past 2 years, I've been suffering mentally quite a bit from the withdrawals when it comes to the lack of a circuit or events for me to do, of a game that gave me my start in the industry, became a large part of my identity, and still means so much to me. Realistically, for me, it was, and is, 15 years of my life, thanks to SC2. I wouldn't have met my beautiful and loving wife without it, never mind everything else. Despite getting to do it at EWC last year, effectively to me, it feels like a part of my life perished, and I feel like I'm almost in mourning for that aspect of my world. It's not been easy for my brain to get over it. That's as best I can describe it, at least. SC2 obviously goes on via amazing community initiatives, and I love getting to watch them happen and lurk, especially the recent event in China. What a great stage, crowd, and production that was. I've thought recently about firing up replays and casting like the old days just to get to do some again. Starcraft, and more broadly RTS, is, in my opinion, one of the greatest pillars of esports, and I'm so sad to see it have gone, having to see it give way in the modern era. Things change, I guess. Rambling over, just figured I'd write what's been on my mind. Much love to the Starcraft 2 community. I think this really sums things up for me as well. It's not the biggest shock, as we have seen StarCraft 2 diminishing over several years, but it still is the end of an era. There's so many experiences over the last 15 years. For me, the last 10 years commentating now, over 10 years. Before that, being a pro player, commentating my first events with Kalaris, we've become good friends over the years because of that. And I think it's really sad for a lot of us to see that the desks with the banter, the professional commentary, the big stages with the lights and the cameras, and the live audiences all around the world, the dream hacks, the IEMs, and all these events. And it's just a moment where you can kind of sense an era passing. And while StarCraft 2 is by no means going to magically snuff out tomorrow and disappear from professional play, I think this marks a point we'll probably look at and go, okay, that's the point where StarCraft 2 stopped being at those big events and started becoming more of a hardcore grassroots, maybe even fighting game-esque style scene, which just isn't quite as big, but still has a lot of passion in it. Claris actually tuned into the stream while I was reacting to this and talking about a bunch of things. And the big thing I was saying, looking at the games that did get picked and just kind of thinking about it. And I'm like, look, I've heard Trackmania is pretty fun. Cargo Brum Brum, sounds kind of stupid. I'm sure the RTS elitists will laugh at it. I'm sure it's a fun game. But realistically for me, I think when I look at the lineup, the thing that kind of depresses me and just doesn't quite make sense is, how is there no StarCraft 2 in this lineup? How is there no real-time strategy in this lineup? If you're doing a World Cup, a World Championship for games, chess is not a real-time strategy esport. It does feel like it takes something away from the prestige of the tournament to not have a real-time strategy game there. And I was kind of mentioning, I just don't think, as impressive as many of these esports are, I don't think any of them match the feeling I get when I watch Clem versus Raynor. When I watch Serral versus Clem in a back and forth war, when I watch Hero and Raynor just playing insane mind games, multitasking out of their minds, the strategies, the way they interact, but also the speed, the precision, the ability to keep up in such an intense game, it really is an experience unlike any other. And to see big esports tournaments not having any real-time strategy, even if it was Age of Empires 2 or something else, I just think this is really, really sad. And I mean, it just feels wrong. And for me, it removes a lot of the interest in a World Cup, where otherwise I might go and watch a little bit of a few of the other games, with no RTS presence, it just feels like it loses all importance to me. Okay, so let's talk about why StarCraft 2 isn't involved and why this isn't that big of a surprise. As sad as it is, and I want to share that with you guys, and please share me your favorite moments of going to events or watching from home. And, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts of remembering these big events, these huge things. For me, for instance, I remember casting Serral versus Rogue at the 2018 BlizzCon semifinals with Maynard, and that was such an amazing stage. There was so much prize money. There had been a war chest for StarCraft with all these skins you could unlock in the previous months where hundreds of thousands of people bought that, and then that helped fund the prize pool and blow it up to this massive amount. And then you had Serral versus Rogue, and it was this insanely close match where everyone thought Rogue was like too good, and the guy who'd been dominating the foreign scene all year long was about to finally get put to rest by the guy who was the king of cheese, Rogue, but also the king of late game. And Serral ended up taking down in one of the most hard-fought, close matches. And it was such a moment where I think a lot of people who'd maybe not followed StarCraft as closely for the previous years, it had just gone free to play as well. And there was this huge influx of people going, oh my God, what is this? Upset, a foreigner beating a Korean, but not just any Korean, Rogue. And just the attention that was on it, the buzz, the community. I remember that, and I think that'll always be one of my favorite memories, is that entire event of just really loving where StarCraft 2 was at that time when it was getting love from the company, new people were coming in, and there was just so many eyeballs focused on this one massive grand finals where this historic moment happened. Okay, so back to the point I was going to make. So why is StarCraft 2 not there? So to think about big esports, whether it be Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Dota, StarCraft, any of these big games that's been esport focused for many years, if you think about it and you followed things, you would remember, especially about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, there was like a billion different esports when there was kind of this initial esports boom, and it became the thing, and every single company wanted to have an esport, and they were all throwing money at it. And you'd see games like Smite pops to mind. I'd see Smite at every single event without ever having played it and thinking, does anyone play this game? And I knew some people did, but like it seemed like there was so many games that had these massive prize pools, and there was tournaments always going on. It felt like 24/7 for these games. This felt almost out of scale to their community. And that's essentially how esports tends to work, is basically, does the company want to throw money at esports? The way this works with a lot of games, whether it be Heroes of the Storm or a Smite, one of these games, they have big prize pools, they have circuits, they have professional scenes, there's lots of money going around, and then overnight it disappears and it just dies. And why does that happen so suddenly? The reason that happens so suddenly is often those scenes don't have as much of a grassroots scene. It's more built by the publisher, the company themselves. And it's usually them going, hey, this is marketing budget. We're making a ton of money through in-game sales, whether that be selling hats, selling pay-to-win features, or just any other content. Basically, if you're selling a lot in the game and you feel like you can build a bigger community, because that's what esports is, it builds community. People want to play, they want to be the best, they want to follow their pro players. People get more invested in the game, and then they spend more on the game as well, or at least that's how the theory often holds. So as long as they're making lots of money, often they keep funding that esports scene. But then suddenly if the company pivots and says, oh, we're not going to produce as much around this, we're going to start working on Smite 2 or Heroes of the Storm 3, or we're working on Overwatch, we're not really bothering with Heroes of the Storm anymore, bam, pro scene disappears overnight, or at least massively crumples down to a much smaller size, because suddenly that marketing budget isn't directed there. So if they stop selling in-game content, or the sales drop, or that kind of loop of marketing budget disappears, you see a lot of esports scenes disappear overnight. Now, obviously, there are games that have a bigger grassroots scene, StarCraft, Counter-Strike, Dota, quite a few of these games, but they still rely on this to have such massive events on these big stages all around the world. Basically, as long as, there's millions and millions of people playing, obviously there would still be worthwhile for some big events organizers to host events, because then they can pick up sponsorship dollars and that sort of stuff. But it's very rare that you see a game that has such an active invested player base without also having that whole loop of they're making new skins, they're making new maps, they're selling new items, they're ongoing doing that development. And also the company themselves is usually pitching in for a lot of those tournaments, whether it be prize pools, straight up covering the production. Sometimes they're paying for the production entirely themselves, the publisher. Essentially, that is what keeps the scene going. And I've heard people say, oh, you need more sponsors. There's enough sponsor dollars in StarCraft. I think the sponsor dollars, it comes as a thing that is quite profitable, but it alone doesn't do anything close to enough to actually support the entirety of these events, unless you're talking about something like an Esports World Cup. If you see them as like a sponsor themselves, where they're going, hey, we're just going to throw money to host this big thing and turn this into a giant gaming event. But, all your other sponsors, they're going to help you make back some money, but realistically, it's the marketing budget of the game itself that's going to allow that cycle to continue. Now, I know that was a bit long-winded, but essentially, hopefully that gives you an idea of where most esports money comes from, how they're able to host these big events. It's not ticket sales. It's not, the bigger amounts of revenue you might get with traditional sports through their advertising deals. It's not stadium tickets. It's not merch. You can make a decent amount of money on those things, and there are like certain teams that sometimes will make a lot of money on a certain thing. But this is all basically subsidized by essentially people spending money on the game itself. Now, what's kind of wild is if that's the case, shouldn't we have seen the StarCraft scene crumple years ago? Crumble, either way, I guess, crumple up, crumble. Basically, yeah, October 2020. I just looked it up. That's when Blizzard stopped active development and said, hey, this is officially a dead game now. Our classic games department might occasionally patch it, but probably not. Honestly, I still to this day, if people go, wait, there's a new patch in StarCraft 2. I thought they were completely unplugging support for the game. Are the servers still up? There's a lot of people who actually thought that meant the servers were getting unplugged if they weren't actively following the game. And yet here we are 5 years later, and we've just had the last big kind of World Cup level circuit now has not got StarCraft at it anymore. But for several years, ESL was running Katowice as a world championship, running events around the world. We then had a couple of years of EWC as well. Like, it's actually shocking that for 5 years since Blizzard was actively developing, when they were putting no money into it and they weren't even running a functional game, there was constantly bugs. If you sign up to Ladder at the moment, you get you get placed in Masters League, almost certainly when you start playing the game, which is like the biggest turnoff to new players. There's game-breaking bugs in there that don't get fixed. There's issues whenever there is an update with like localization and all sorts of things that should be easily avoided if there was anyone, even one full-time employee just working on StarCraft and whose job it was to really know how the ins and outs work. And that's the whole problem, is basically without that ongoing support to the point where we don't even have a fully functioning StarCraft 2. It does kind of function. Don't get me wrong, the classic games department does what they can, but like there are certain bugs that are just clearly never getting fixed because no one knows how to fix them. You can't even upload to the arcade, so the kind of custom arcade and mod scene is just super screwed right now. We've had guys like Giant Grant Games, had a massive community who's kind of moved on to doing other game content, and I think obviously he's had his own personal reasons for that, but I mean, it's got to at least partially be motivated by the fact that, hey, you can't even, this whole community you've built around, you guys can't even upload maps right now to StarCraft 2. I mean, this level of not just, okay, we're not selling new hats in the game, but also the game itself is possibly going to break. You're not going to get any promotion if you run an event for StarCraft 2 from Blizzard themselves. You're not going to get any support from them, really. That is a really, really tough thing to ask. And the fact that the scene continued as it did for so long at this level is insane. So I guess when we think about it that way, it's not too surprising that these games, who all have active development, a lot of them are mobile games with massive user bases, massive cycles of microtransactions that they're feeding back into the marketing of the game, can throw money at this. They probably, I would imagine, they subsidize the prize pool and maybe pay for the prize pool. They might even just pay Esports World Cup millions of dollars and say, hey, host our game at your big event because it's prestigious and you can run it all and we'll give you all the money to do it. I would not be surprised if that's the case for a Mobile Bang Bang, or Mobile Legends Bang Bang, or whatever this stuff is. Like, it's one of these things where money speaks, and I think that's a big part of what is going to, potentially keep a game going at one of these events. Of course, as I was saying earlier, it's totally wrong for RTS not be there. Hera from Age of Empires 2 actually made this post, and this was interesting because a week ago, someone was posting on Reddit. They saw that Hera and a bunch of his teammates, they all got picked up by Vitality, big team, and they were saying, guess what, guys? I think Age of Empires 2 is taking StarCraft 2's spot at the Esports World Cup. And I actually thought, damn, that seems like a convincing theory. He says, look, it's quite disheartening to see a classic genre like RTS be completely overlooked and left out. I understand a lot of people prefer faster paced games, but the strategic depth, the variety, the high skill ceiling that RTS brings to the table is something that is at the very least odd to ignore. Every RTS out there has a huge fan base that has dedicated many years to playing the game, following the pro scene, and genuinely wanting the best for their community. I was really hoping that we could see a title from the genre be a part of the event, but seeing none is just a sad day for any RTS fan out there. All I can hope for is for RTS games to continue thriving and growing, and one day making a comeback to the mainstream. I couldn't agree more with her here. I think, I love Age of Empires 2 as well, and it's just sad to see no real-time strategy. If Age of Empires 2 took the spot, I would go, oh, that sucks for StarCraft, but also I'd be happy for Age of Empires 2, and I'd go, that's cool. There is a respect for real-time strategy and understanding that, of course, an Esports World Cup is not complete without a real-time strategy game at it. And no, chess does not count. Chess as a real-time. Everyone's like, I guess chess is taking our spot, man. We've got chess here. It's like, hey, we can hand Magnus some money. I'm sure he'll do well there. And I do like chess as well, but it is nothing even like a real-time strategy game. This does bring me to one more point which is really brought up, and that is the fact that a few years ago, I feel like things were quite positive in terms of what's the next great real-time strategy multiplayer competitive game going to be like? Is it going to be Zero Space? Is it going to be Immortal Gates of Fire? Is it going to be Stormgate, the big thing a few years ago that everyone was excited about, which has obviously crashed and burned since? There was so much hype for so many different games. There were so many projects, and it felt like everything has just been absolutely squished. I have a lot of friends working across all these different studios and other studios working on strategy games, and especially all the ones working in America and working, in these bigger companies or these startups that were very much relying on investor money and bigger publishers and stuff that get all this investment money. They all basically have the same story, which is they have been desperately looking for funding because there was unlimited money for anyone making games. Essentially, money was cheap, interest rates were low. 2022, post-COVID, the invasion of Ukraine and all this other stuff going on in the world. I don't really understand economics that deeply, but essentially, interest rates high, money is suddenly very expensive to get your hands on. And we've seen not just real-time strategy, we've seen all gaming companies, tons of layoffs, tons of projects getting canned and canceled if they don't think it's any profitable anymore. And that's especially hurt real-time strategy because it was already kind of on the fringe where it's like, oh, that's a niche kind of market you're looking for. Those games aren't crazy profitable or they're not crazy popular. You're looking for like a little slice of the gaming pie. There's no belief that making a real-time strategy has any chance of popping off like a Fortnite or popping off like a Roblox or anything like that and making you multiple billions of dollars every single month in value. Often they're looking for very modest 50 million, 100 million, maybe $1 billion profits over several years. And that is something which, of course, a lot of these big investors are not as interested interested in to begin with. And now, with money disappearing, a lot of these projects who are relying on extra funding or were like, oh, we're looking for a publisher. Some of them can't even find a publisher to publish the game. A lot of them, are like, hey, we just need, a bit of money to finish it. Not that much. Bam, zero funding to be found. And this is not just Stormgate. I'm talking about devs across multiple games. No one's really wanted to say this stuff on the record, but it is a very negative investment environment in the gaming scene, and especially in the strategy gaming scene in like America, where a lot of these games were coming from that we were relying on. Real-time strategy is like a dirty word, and it's really hard for them right now because it wasn't like it was the easiest thing before, but in a negative and kind of difficult investment environment, it's just rough. So I don't know how many of those games are even going to make it to fully being published. For those that don't know, Tempest Rising recently came out, really cool success story. I think that game was rushed out because it looked like it was really polished in some areas and there was a few things that weren't quite finished. And I'm pretty sure they saw the success. Like the publisher was like, get this out. It's not going to make money. Just get it out. And then they went, oh, it's made a bunch of money. Oh, I guess you guys can keep developing it. And we do need more success stories like that, as well as maybe the global economic situation to pivot for, this whole situation to change, and for us to see these other games. Hopefully, I still have hope for things like Zero Space and whatnot and Immortal that are basically going along on a shoestring budget and working off volunteer time. We've recently heard news that David Kim and a few friends are getting together just independently, zero outside funding, and saying, hey, we're going to work on some stuff and see if we can make something cool without a publisher breathing down our throat and trying to force crazy monetization and forcing us to find some model where we can like leech every single dollar out of the users so we can just make the game that we want to make. And I think that's more and more where my hopes are these days. It's like these very small shoestring indie projects to make cool stuff. The likelihood of one of those overnight turning into a massive esports competitive game that's making millions of dollars and feeding it back into an esports circuit is, of course, very minor. But I think there'll still be some really cool strategy and real-time strategy projects that come out of that. So I'm hopeful a little bit for that. I've also just been loving every game that comes out of Poland. They're not really... Even the real-time strategies that come out of a lot of the Polish studios aren't really like competitive big style, but there's a lot of like different takes on the strategy, the city builder, and different genre that are coming out of Poland that I've really been enjoying, because a lot of those studios just seem to be making very independent passion projects. And it seems like they've continued to pump out fantastic games over the last few years, when it does feel like the American games companies have been really struggling to put out quality. All right, guys, just to finish on that point, I still think Starcraft 3 will come out eventually. I think it's an easy $1 billion or a couple $1 billion Blizzard can make with that. They don't have the crew to make it. I don't know if they have a studio they can outsource it to. I think it'll take them quite some years to get a team together and actually get that to happen. Obviously, we already had news of a Starcraft shooter coming out first, but especially if that does well and they see the value in the IP, I think hopefully that'll move things along. But I predicted 2033 7 years ago. I predicted that. That's now 7 years away. So we are halfway there which means just another 7 years to wait for StarCraft 3. Don't hold your breath, it's going to take a while. All right, so where does this leave the scene? What is the real impact on the scene? Because there's still going to be a ton of tournaments. Realistically, last year already, the Esports World Cup had a very rushed series of qualifying circuits, like a DreamHack Dallas that just happened overnight almost. GSL 2 seasons that were like 2 weeks apart, which was like ridiculous. So there's a ton of smaller events run by Wardy, myself, Tasteless, Bulgaria, Star Zagora, Home Story Cup, obviously massive. We had Stellarfest recently in Canada, Maestros by the Comeback TV guys in Paris. Like, there's a ton of these small and mid-size events that are going to continue to happen. What's the real impact? The real pain is for the players. And I think what a lot of people don't realize, and I guess I didn't fully realize as well until I was talking to a pro player about a few months ago, and I was like, look, at the end of the day, if EWC, I think it'd probably happen at the time I was saying, because we were talking about it, but I have no understanding. I just think they will, because it would be crazy not to have a real-time strategy. At Esports World Cup, I was obviously wrong, so sorry to that pro gamer if I got your hopes up. I did tell you I had no inside info at the time, though, so hopefully you're not too annoyed at me. But he was saying, I really hope so, because realistically, a lot of the team's salaries are based on EWC involvement. EWC pays money to the teams. There's a massive prize pool for the teams, depending on how they place across all the games. And so a lot of these companies who have teams across multiple games, they want to win that $10 million or $15 million. It's a crazy prize pool. And so they end up hiring players from all these different teams. That's why we've had in the last few years with EWC an influx of Twisted Minds, Falcons, Vitality, Virtus Pro, tons of different teams across the sphere of the big gaming orgs, the big teams, have all picked up StarCraft players and paid them salaries. Now, some of those contracts were short-lived, even though I think they're not meant to only pick them up for the tournament. It is meant to be, you're meant to actually pick them up and give the player security outside of just the Esports World Cup tournament itself. But many of them did get that ongoing salary, and they did get good support. And that is going to dry up very quickly. I imagine when those contracts expire, many of them will not get re-signed, which is very sad. Hats off to guys like Hero, who just signed with SK. If that's the reason they signed him only, then they might be a bit sad with that investment. I'm happy Hero's getting his bag, at least until that contract ends. Hopefully it's a year minimum contract. But honestly, I really feel like this is just terrible for the players. A lot of them are going to struggle with that. Your Clems and Serrals are still going to get decent salaries, I'm sure, but your rank 20 players, your rank 15s, even your rank 10s, I think we're going to see more teamless players and more players having to accept smaller sponsorships, smaller salaries, and that's obviously very rough. Worse, I think the big problem here is obviously if the RTS scene just has a handful of guys at the top, and it's already shrunk a bit to that, but if it shrinks even more to the point where it is just Serral and Clem, and like Raynor and Hero and everyone retire for some reason, and we're like, it's Serral, Clem, and a bunch of guys who never can even take a single map off these guys, obviously that would make the StarCraft scene very boring. So I really feel for the pro players out there. I hope your salaries don't get hit too hard, and I really hope we can all support them a bit more, as well as some of the players pivot more to mixing in a bit of content creation as a part-time side hustle on the side of practice, and getting after it a bit. Being like, I've seen special coaching a lot recently. I've seen Lambo with a very successful Zerg Patreon, which a ton of Zerg players have been swearing by, and they've been really improving off of it. So I do think it's going to be a bit more, and we've already been moving in that direction, a bit less full-time pro gamer and part-time pro, part-time content creator, or providing some service like coaching and building communities and those sorts of things. Now, of course, with the biggest tournaments disappearing, the ones everyone goes, when's the next tournament happening? And there are a number of people, man. There could have been like literally $4,000, $10,000, $20,000 tournaments within a month. And there will still be tons of people who only watch the biggest tournaments and only hear about those, who will come in my stream chat, they'll come in my YouTube comments and go, when's a tournament happening? I haven't watched StarCraft in forever. Why are there never any tournaments? And I'll be like, I know you guys aren't as plugged into the scene as me, but like, did you not just see that best of 7 finals last weekend? What rock are you living under? Well, I think those people are either going to discover all these tournaments that have already been happening, or they're going to assume StarCraft's completely dead because there's no more DreamHacks, there's no more IEMs, and there's no more Esports World Cup. But I think those mid-sized tournaments, those grassroots, those community, those independent tournament organizers are going to have very big shoes to fill. That means they're going to need more community support than ever. There's going to be a lot of crowdfunding going on, no doubt, which has already been happening for many years, ever since Blizzard stopped support, right? Blizzard used to run weekly cups. I run a weekly cup. The French guys, TKL and whatnot, run the European Cup now, and Wardy runs the Korean Cup. We'll do this through our communities, and you guys help make it possible by helping to crowdfund that. But also, I mean, that's just a weekly cup. We also run other events as well. And those are things which I think right now with this news and us going, okay, the calendar just opened wide up. Normally we're fighting with DreamHacks, GSLs, and big qualifiers for Esports World Cup and other things for space in the schedule, we've got a lot of space to fill, to spread out. We'll be talking together, no doubt, making sure we're not stepping on each other's toes too much. But we need to make it so that there is actually a rotation of top players having a lot of money to win, and of course, a lot of things to practice for constantly. I think the best way to support these tournaments is to find the tournaments that put the most dollars in the pro players' pockets. We've already seen a massive shrinking in prize pool and the amount of money in StarCraft 2. If you want to see StarCraft 2 levels stay up, you need to think about where your dollars are going, and you need to look at those dollars getting into the pro players' hands, especially as these salaries shrink and that sort of stuff. There are a lot of organizers who all do this in many different ways. I've done this different ways in the past. Sometimes I've done it where I've raised money whilst doing a subathon, and I've just kind of put part of my subathon money towards a prize pool for a tournament. What we've done in the last couple of Pigfests, and we'll do for this one, is did I just let the cat out of the hat? Yes, we're hosting another Pigfest. We were already talking about organizing this when this news came out, and we have it slated for the late February window. So get yourselves frigging excited. I didn't even announce that very well, did I? But hey, honestly, we're gonna try and make this the biggest one we've done in a while, and we put 100% of your donations to the prize pool. Not only that, in the past, I've put in my own money to the prize pool as well, and I also cover any fees and taxes and things like that on any of those donations as well. Obviously, there's always donations every time you send someone money. There's always transfer fees and all that sort of stuff. In the past, we do that. We try to make that money back. How? Through the goodwill of the community, people being nice enough to then subscribe, donate extra money afterwards, or to watch our YouTube videos, to support our Patreons and all that sort of stuff. And we try to keep that cycle going where I go, cool, I am so lucky to be able to do what I do. Let's try and direct and just create I'm just going to be a way you can channel your money to the pro players for these events to a certain extent. And obviously there's a lot more work that needs to be done in that regard, but I think these are going to be a bigger part of the scene than they ever were. They already have been stepping up massively and creating, I think, a very vibrant and enjoyable scene over the last few years where people aren't just kind of sitting from the sideline going, the sound production's not perfect on this stream hack, and kind of not really appreciating it. I think people hopefully are going to appreciate a lot more when it's the streamers and content creators and people that they know from broadcasting for many years who are going, hey, we're not professional tournament organizers, but we've got passion. We love what we're doing here, and we're going to try and, put the players up in front of you, show their personalities, show off their skill, and make it as awesome an experience as possible. And obviously, it'd be great with a video like this to just give you guys a donation link straight away. We don't have that ready yet. Drop by my stream over the coming weeks. I'll be putting out community posts on YouTube. I'll try to open it up next week, donations towards that. But we're putting up community posts on YouTube, Discord posts, social media posts, and of course, you can always come to my stream and type !Pigfest for any up-to-date information on how to donate to the prize pool. And I should have that all organized as well as the dates and starting to announce the players from about next week, hopefully very early next week. All right, guys, so to finish up, this is the end of an era. It's kind of sad, but it's also not surprising. I think if this came completely as a shock, it would be much harder for me to process and for a lot of you to process. But we've seen this coming for a long time. The fact that StarCraft got big world championships for as many years as it did after Blizzard support is actually insane. And I think there is a silver lining to this. As Shin says here in this post, it's bittersweet. StarCraft 2 players have been able to participate and train with even more passion because that big shining light of EWC, that massive prize pool, in that sense, I truly believe EWC was a great thing for the scene. And I'm totally with him there. However, seeing players and viewers constantly feeling anxious about whether EWC would continue, losing motivation to practice because everything depended on a single tournament, made me feel sad for StarCraft 2. Now that StarCraft 2 no longer has EWC, I hope the players and fans can work even harder together and build a freer scene that does not rely on any single organization or event. And this is what gets me, and I've talked about this a bunch over the years, and some people, they go, what are you talking about, Pig? And I go, I've said this for a while, I'm like, I get EWC gave salary to pro players and all that stuff, but it is ridiculous to just focus on one tournament that wouldn't even announce until like a month before it happened, whether or not you're going to be committing to this. And I said, it's just such an unstable and crazy thing. And to see so many pro players waiting out on this, I really feel, honestly, to be brutally honest, a lot of pro players, the moment this wasn't announced by January last year that EWC was continuing, they should have either started quitting StarCraft, scaling back their involvement, or they should have started, doing a bit more streaming or a bit more content creation, trying to get a YouTube channel going and all that sort of stuff. Because the writing's been on the wall for a while. At the age of just being a full-time pro player who doesn't have to do anything else, unless you are winning most tournaments out there, if you're not in the top 5 players in the world, I mean, that's been a very hard thing to make a living from for a very long time. And I know some salaries have helped players be able to do that despite that. But I definitely felt like it was something where, they should have already been preparing for that next step. And I don't mean to say that in a harsh way, but I mean to say just in a realistic way, EWC, they didn't announce it for so long last year. This year, at least we've got this announcement and this clear break early, so players can make that decision. Do they have the passion to expand beyond just a full-time player? Is this something where they have passion for the game to teach and create content, and make videos and do entertaining things, make a euthermal pivot, make a mana pivot, do YouTube videos and stuff? Or are they going, you know what, I was only interested in playing this and watching it as a pro player. It's time for me to move on to that next step in my life. And I think that's something which is important, because to me, it felt very toxic. This like, no, we're just waiting for this big payday from this one big tournament that like kind of only announces StarCraft 2 at the 11th hour. I think it's much healthier when people are appreciating the game. And even if the overall skill level drops a little bit, I would rather it drops a little bit, but everyone clearly have the same amount of understanding of what the scene's going to provide them, and getting in there and saying, cool, let's support our local tournaments. Let's have the positivity of a scene like Age of Empires, where they're so grateful for every tournament they have. And yeah, there's a little bits of toxicity, but just the overall vibe I remember for StarCraft 2, people would be like, there's only this much money for this tournament. It was always complaining things weren't good enough. We always want Blizzard to step up. We always want Big Daddy to help us out. And now that things are truly just organized by the community themselves, it's more self-reliant, I think there should be much less taking things for granted and appreciating what we've got and supporting each other. And basically, even if it's more of a hardcore hobby as opposed to a full-time profession going forwards, I'm okay with that, because I would rather that rather than one single thing kind of hold it up and inflate the bubble, which could burst at any moment. And you're kind of always on edge going, oh, geez, what's going to happen if this bubble bursts overnight? I kind of like things being honest and us actually understanding what the hell we're doing as a scene. And I've got nothing wrong with a game being a hardcore competitive hobby. You know, there's people out there who play so many weird sports. I was watching someone play pro pickleball the other day, and I was like, I don't think he's making as much money as Djokovic is playing tennis. I don't think so. But he seems to be having a good time. He's got a sponsor. I'm sure he's making a little bit of money. Is it the best career path? Probably not compared to tennis, but maybe it's okay. Maybe it's decent. Maybe if you become the best of the best, you can still make a ton of money there. I don't know. I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know. The point being, I just prefer this kind of coming back to reality. I think StarCraft's been on this path for many years now, and I think there is a silver lining to us going, cool, let's actually support small organizers and give them the love they deserve. And let's try and make StarCraft 2 a great event that we all kind of work on together to make as good as it can possibly be. All right, I know I've harped on for so very long, but this has been a bit emotional talking about this. I guess final point there on independent tournaments, good chance for people to start running modded events, hey? Now that there's no big circuit tying everything together, I would love to see some more creative maps used in tournaments. I'm going to go over think about what maps we should be playing in Pigfest. Maybe mix one or two fun ones in there. We'll see. Maybe some water slides. Not sure if there's any super balanced water slide maps, but I might go host some show matches, see if we can mix some fun maps in there. Don't think we'll do any changes to balances for this one, but going forwards, who knows? And running more events with interesting things rather than just waiting for Blizzard to just make the game good or to fix the bugs, I think is going to be the path that we should be working on to enjoy the game as much as possible. And obviously, each tournament organizer, each community can organize that and decide that on their own. But I watched some of the modded tournaments and modded maps in Age of Empires 2 with crazy map starts and stuff that just create such weird and unique fun experiences. And they contrast nicely with the super normie Kings of the Desert. We're playing Arabia 1v1 every single game. Bam, bam, bam. Smashing heads in the most competitive mode. I like having that variety between the most extreme vanilla and the weird modded mode. Anyway, you guys let me know what you think. Once again, sad day, not unexpected. StarCraft will go on. It always will. It always has. And I can't wait to see what the community is going to do to deliver. Stay hyped for Pigfest 7. We'll see you all with that next month. Thanks heaps for watching, guys. Goodbye and good night.